What's going on, duelists? It's your boy Nick, bringing you today on the channel an update to the long-awaited Dinomorphia deck profile. Now this is going to be post the September 25th ban list that at time of recording just dropped yesterday, and also post the 2023 Megatins, also known as the 25th anniversary tins as well. For those of you new to the channel, welcome. My name is Nick. We do Yu-Gi-Oh! Content mainly focused around rogue and casual decks alike. If that's the kind of content that you're interested in, then I highly encourage you to subscribe to the channel, smash the like button, comment down below on what you think. That way you guys can become a part of this journey. We're growing into becoming a small community, and we're working our way to 1,500 subscribers, and I cannot get there without your help. So with that being said, welcome everybody. And like I said, this is going to be an update to my Dinomorphia deck list. Now, Dinomorphia is a deck that has been in the game for quite some time, and it has quite a few fans, honestly, not only because it's a dinosaur archetype, but also aesthetically, it's really cool looking. It's like futuristic dinosaurs, and to me, that's really cool, and I know to a lot of other people, they feel the same way. However, I know a lot of people are not a fan of its playstyle, which is basically Floodgate Turbo. Now, that's honestly not a fault of their own. I mean, their boss monster is a walking floodgate, like a skill drain, basically, which they don't have any control over. It just is what it is. But what I like about this deck specifically is how it likes to flirt with danger, being that it's one of the few decks in the game that actually generates advantage the lower their life points actually are. So this deck does everything it can to reduce their life points as low as humanly possible. That way it makes your opponent want to pull their hair out because, like I said, the lower your life points are when you're piloting this deck, the better it is for you, unironically enough. So with that being said and the intro out of the way, we're going to dive into this 40-card, very consistent deck list that I'm bringing to you today. So of course, we are starting with the monster lineup, which is going to be a playset of Dinomorphia Theresia, which is effectively this deck's best starter, or the only starter, I guess you could say. Theresia, upon normal or special summon, allows you to set a Dinomorphia trap directly from your deck to your spell trap zone. Then if your life points are 2,000 or less, this card gains 500 attack. So what I like about this effect is that it cannot be stopped by cards like Ash Blossom, because you're specifically setting a trap directly from your deck to your field, and you're not adding anything to your hand. So it has no interaction with Ash whatsoever, which is nice. But in addition to that, she just lets you toolbox almost any trap that you want from your deck. Kind of similar to Altergeist Marionetter in a way, if you're familiar with the Altergeist deck. In addition to that, if this card is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can banish a trap from your graveyard, any trap mind you, to special summon one level 4 or lower Dinomorphia monster from your grave except herself. So she even floats when she's removed by destruction, whether that's battle or card effect. As long as you have a trap engraved to banish, she will special summon another level 4 or lower Dinomorphia, which is really, really cool. So obviously you max out on a playset of Theresia. Not to mention, not that this deck was expensive, but it did get reprints in this year's Megatins. So if you're interested in playing the deck, it's about as cheap as it'll ever be, most likely. But moving on, we also play a playset of Dinomorphia Diplos in the main deck. Now this card just got a foil holo upgrade in the Megatins as a super rare, and I couldn't be happier. This card was a common for so long, and it's nice to finally have a holographic version of it. It looks absolutely beautiful. This card isn't as good as Theresia as a starter in my opinion, but it is necessary to play at 3 in the deck. And basically what it does is upon normal or special, you send a Dinomorphia card from your deck to the graveyard. So he's effectively a Foolish Burial on summon. Then if your life points are 2,000 or less, you inflict 500 damage to your opponent. So this card also does a little bit of burn. Again, only if your life is 2,000 or less, which you're probably thinking in your head that's hard to accomplish, but trust me when I say it's not. Dinomorphia absolutely loves getting their life as low as possible, and it's a lot easier than you think to make your life 2,000 or less in this deck. In addition to that, just like Theresia, he also floats upon destruction. If he's destroyed by battle or card effect, you can banish a trap from grave, any trap, keep that in mind, to then special summon a level 4 or lower Dinomorphia monster from your graveyard except a copy of himself. So one of the things that I do generally like doing is if I normal summon Diplos, activate its effect, I'll use this effect to send a Theresia from deck to grave, and then when Diplos gets killed by battle or card effect, I can use this graveyard effect to then go ahead and revive that Theresia from the graveyard, and then trigger Theresia's on summon effect and try to get back into the game that way. So Diplos is great as a 3 of in my opinion. Not as great as Theresia to open with, but it still gets you to Theresia eventually, which obviously is really nice. And having the additional name in the main deck is important, given that at time of recording, there are only 2 Dinomorphia main deck monsters, which is Theresia and Diplos. So you do kind of have to max out, especially for the grind game. But moving on to the non-archetypal dinosaur monsters, or Dinomorphia stuff, we play 1 copy of Miscellaneousaurus. Unfortunately, it did not come back to like 2, for example, on the most recent ban list, which is kind of sad. So unfortunately, we're going to have to spend a couple more months with just 1 Misk. Misk is obviously crucial to any dinosaur deck. If you haven't read Misk, I highly encourage you do. This card is nuts. It basically makes it so that your dinosaur monsters are unaffected by your opponent's activated effects during the phase of which you activate Miscellaneousaurus, which that's absolutely insane. In addition to that, he can banish himself from grave along with a few other dinosaurs to then special a dinosaur from deck. So this card does quite a bit. I know a lot of people wish this card to come back to more than 1. I thought it would on this most recent list that we got yesterday, but unfortunately it didn't. So unfortunately we are still stuck with the 1 Misk, but obviously it's a mandatory one of you. If you're playing dinosaurs, you have to play Misk. Moving on to a tech choice of mine, I'm playing 1 copy of Flower Dino in this deck. Now, a lot of you probably aren't familiar with this card, and that's fine. It came out in Battle of Chaos, actually, right in the same set where Dinomorphia was released in. It's a level 4 Earth Dinosaur effect monster, 2000 attack, 0 defense, and it cannot be normal summoned or Sept. It must be special summoned by its own effect. And that is, you can only use each of the following effects once per turn. If you activate a trap card or trap effect, or if your opponent activates a spell card or spell effect, you can special summon this card from your hand. So effectively, if you activate a trap or trap effect, you special it, or if your opponent activates a spell or spell effect, you can special it from hand as a free extender. So the summoning condition is not hard to fulfill whatsoever. And then what happens is it's just a free level 4 body that you can use as Xyz material or fusion material, however you want to use it for. And if it's sent to the graveyard, again, notice the wording is if it's sent, does not matter how it's sent to grave. You can target 3 of your banished spells and traps, place them on the bottom of the appropriate decks in any order, then draw 1 card. So effectively, Flower Dino is a nice level 4 extender for this list that also lets you recur your banished traps back into the deck and gets you a free draw for your troubles. Now, why is that good? Because Dinomorphia, aside from them also lowering your life as low as possible, they also do banish a lot of their traps to make their plays, so it's nice to have some recurability, and I felt that as a one-of, Flower Dino was perfect for that. So we just play 1 copy of that, obviously. Now moving into another tech card that we play that recently came out of Cyberstorm Axis is 2 copies of Wannabe. Now, you're probably wondering why we're running this, and for those of you who are unfamiliar with this card's absolutely insane. It's a level 2 light insect effect monster that reads as follows. And it states, during the end phase, note that it says the end phase, which means it's either player's end phase, you can send this card from your hand or field to the graveyard, that's cost. Excavate cards from the top of your deck, equal to the number of your opponent's unused spell and trap zones. And then you can set 1 excavated trap to your field, but send it to the graveyard during the next end phase. Also place the rest on the bottom of the deck in any order. So that's a lot of words. Effectively what this card is during the end phase, if it's in your hand or field, you send it from the hand or field to grave as cost, and then you can excavate cards off the top of your deck equal to the number of unused spell trap zones your opponent has. So basically, if you're going first, which this deck loves doing, your opponent's not going to have any spells and traps occupying their spell trap zone for the most part. And which means that you're basically going to get to excavate up to 5 cards deep. And if you excavate any trap, you can set it to your field, but send it to the graveyard during the next end phase. Now, it doesn't let you activate the trap the turn you set it, but what it does is that it sets you up for the next turn because this effect does activate in the end phase. So you set your trap, and the traps, as soon as you pass turn, the trap's already live. Just make sure that you use it before that end phase approaches, because then otherwise the trap does have to send itself to the graveyard. But Wannabe is effectively like a pot of duality, or almost like a prosperity, but just for traps, which is really, really insane. Even if your opponent occupies like 1 or 2 spell trap zones, you're still excavating either 4 or 3 deep, which is still a pretty good excavate, and you're just pulling any trap. Doesn't matter whether it's counter, a normal, continuous, any trap card you want that you excavate, you set it, and yeah, it's just insane. So this card is a huge consistency booster for this deck, and I like it as a 2-of. In testing, it's worked out great for me. Now, rounding out the last monster that we main deck is just a playset of Ash Blossom, old, reliable, tried and true. Now that the format is slightly changing, you know that Kashtira is basically out of contention now that Arise Heart's banned. I think Ash is still just the most generic thing you can be playing, because Ash just checks about every deck you're going to come across, whether you're playing competitively or not. There isn't a single deck that doesn't lose to Ash in some shape or form. So obviously, you know, playing Ash is just important for this theme to stop, you know, those particular interactions that you want to try and choke your opponent out with. But that rounds out the monsters. Now moving into the spells, of which we play a playset of Pot of Duality. Now you're probably wondering, why do we play Pot of Duality in this list? And that's because Duality doesn't actually hurt us. I'm well aware that you cannot special summon the turn you use this card, but Dinomorphia doesn't really special summon anything on your turn. They're mostly doing their special summoning on the opponent's turn specifically, which means that the restriction of Duality does not hurt us. It's just, again, excavate up to 3 cards deep, add one of the excavated cards to your hand, so it's just more consistency. You know, you activate Duality, search for like a starter or another trap, you know, a piece to complement your end board, and keep it moving. We play 1 Fossil Dig, just 1. I know the ratio seems a little weird, but honestly, I never felt like I needed more than 1. You can play more, but again, I wanted to keep the deck count to a strict 40 cards. If you wanted to play 2 Fossil Dig, you could, and then just bump the deck up to 41, but I wasn't a big fan of that. Honestly, the Fossil Dig as a 1-of is fine in my opinion. I don't think you need any more than that, because generally you're only going to be using it to search either Theresia or maybe like a miscellaneous source for the most part. Outside of that, I don't think playing, you know, multiples is necessary, especially in a format where Droll exists. I mean, once you resolve it and you get Drolled, if you have any other copies in hand, you're not going to be able to use them anyway. So they're kind of just bricks if you draw multiples, in my opinion. So I think playing it at 1 is perfectly fine. And then we round out the last spell we mainboard is the 1 copy of Called By, obviously to stop pesky hand traps and annoying things that your opponent may be trying to throw at us. And that's the spell lineup. It's really, there's 3 Duality, 1 Fossil Dig, 1 Called By, so there's 5 spells total in the main. And now we're going to get to the bread and butter of this deck list, which is the traps. So we're starting off with a playset of Dinomorphia Frenzy. Now this trap is, in my opinion, their best card, or their best normal trap, I should say. What it does is, during your opponent's main phase specifically, keep that in mind, even though that this is a trap card, it can only be used during the opponent's main phase, so be conscious of that when you play it. You pay half your life points. That is cost, by the way. So remember what I was saying, how this deck loves to get their life points as low as possible? One of the things you're going to notice with a lot of their trap cards is that the cost for their traps, they make you pay half your life, which seems counterproductive, obviously, in Yu-Gi-Oh!, but for Dinomorphia, they absolutely want that. Trust me when I say that. So you're going to pay half your life points, then you're going to fusion summon a Dinomorphia monster from your extra deck, using only 1 monster from your deck and 1 monster from your extra deck as the fusion material. So effectively, this is just a trap card version of polymerization. You know, you can send a material from deck, which is nice, and a material from your extra deck, which is nice. Generally, what you're going to be going into is the monster depicted here in the background, which is Dinomorphia Rexstrom, which we will talk more about once we get to the extra deck. Now, all the other Dinomorphia traps, for the most part, they also have graveyard effects. The normal traps have the same graveyard effect, and the counter traps have also the same graveyard effect. So for the normal traps, that graveyard effect reads as follows. It says, when your opponent activates a card or effect while your life points are 2,000 or less, you can banish this card from your graveyard, and then you take no effect damage from your opponent's card effects this turn. So effectively, if your opponent's playing some kind of burn strategy, because you do get your life points very, very low, it's very easy for your opponent to activate like some cheesy card that like burns you for game or whatever. All the Dinomorphia normal traps in the graveyard can banish themselves at spell speed 2, mind you, because obviously every trap card is still spell speed 2 in the graveyard. So you can chain in response and make it so that you do not take any effect damage from your opponent's card effects for the duration of that turn, which is absolutely insane. So you want to max out on Frenzy, obviously a very important card for the theme. Then we follow that up with just 2 copies of Domain. I've been testing this deck a lot, and I've noticed that playing 3 Domain, in my opinion, Domain is great, but the better card to use is Frenzy. Now, let me explain what Domain does, and then I'll dive in a little more as to why I'm just playing 2 of it. So it's during the main phase, so keep in mind, Frenzy was during opponent's main phase only. Domain is during the main phase, which means you can use it on your main phase or the opponent's. You pay half your life as cost, fusion summon a Dinomorphia fusion from your extra deck using monsters from your hand, deck, or field as material. So this is effectively another fusion spell, or fusion trap, I should say. But it lets you use material from hand, deck, or field And then it has the same graveyard effect of Frenzy, where when your opponent activates a card or effect, while your life points are 2,000 or less, you can banish this card from grave, and you take no effect damage from your opponent's card effects this turn. So why am I playing just 2 Domain and 3 Frenzy? And it's because Frenzy, in my opinion, is the better card in this list. Generally, Frenzy helps you get to Rexstrom a lot easier, and again, I'll talk more about Rexstrom when we get to the extra deck. But I felt that Domain, like, Frenzy's just, in my opinion, the better card. Domain isn't bad, but, like, I would much rather, in most scenarios, have a Frenzy over having a Domain. And that's why I felt that, like, cutting down on the Domain from 3 to 2 just made sense, because of all the searchability that you do have with this deck, and having Theresia being able to set any particular Dinomorphia trap you want. I just wanted to clean the deck up and increase consistency as much as I could. So cutting Domain from a 3 of to a 2 of made sense to me. Also in the scenarios where, like, you'd open duplicates of these cards are hard once per turns. So I felt that, you know, drawing multiples was equally as bad as not having them at all. So you want to thread, like, that fine line. So I think playing 2 Domain, it makes sense for this particular list. I know some people may feel differently, but trust me, if you play the deck enough, I think you can get away with just playing 2 Domain, in my honest opinion. Moving on, we play 2 copies of Dinomorphia Brute, another normal trap. You pay half your life points, and you destroy a Dinomorphia monster you control, and 1 card your opponent controls. So this is basically a pop 2. What's nice is that the destruction does not target, which is really nice, and all of your Dinomorphias, including the extra deck ones, they do float when they're destroyed. So even though it seems counterproductive, you going like -2 to, like, taking a 2-for-1 basically, because you lose the Brute, you lose your card just to pop a single opponent's card. But keep in mind that all of your Dinomorphia monsters, whether they're main decked or extra decked, they all float upon destruction, so you do get value back for your investment. And then again, the same graveyard effect where you can banish this from grave and mitigate damage that you would take for the rest of the turn, which is really, really nice from card effects. Moving on, we play 1 copy of Dinomorphia Alert. This is, again, pay half your life points, and you special summon up to 2 Dinomorphia monsters from your grave whose total levels equal 8 or less. So this is effectively a double Monster Reborn, or just a Monster Reborn, depending on what it is you're bringing back, because their levels have to equal 8 or less, but you can bring up to 2. So you can either bring back, like, 1 level 8, or bring back 2 level 4s, or you can also bring back Kentragina, who's in the extra deck, but she's a level 6, which is unfortunate, because there is no level 2 Dinomorphia. Otherwise, if there was, you could be able to bring back that plus a Kentragina, but at time of recording, a level 2 Dinomorphia doesn't actually exist. Maybe in the future, Konami will change that. But double Monster Reborn is nice, and then again, the exact same graveyard effect where, you know, you can banish it if your life is 2,000 or less, and avoid taking effect damage from your opponent's card effects for the rest of the turn. Now moving into the Dinomorphia counter traps. We start things off with a playset of Dinomorphia Intact. Probably the best counter trap the deck has. If Frenzy is their best normal trap, this is their best counter trap in my opinion. Effectively, when a monster effect is activated, while you control a Dinomorphia card, you pay half your life points, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that monster. Also, whenever you take battle damage this turn, the damage taken becomes half your life points at that time. So this card effectively makes it so that you don't lose to Ash Blossom when you activate cards like Domain or Frenzy, since those are cards that do let you fuse using material from deck. They are ashable, unfortunately, kind of similar to the ruling with Branded Fusion, and or cards like Welcome Labyrinth or Big Welcome Labyrinth. Those can also be ashed. So this deck already has an in-archetype solution to Ash on either Frenzy or Domain, which is huge, because all the requirement states is that you have to control a Dinomorphia card. So let's say you activate Frenzy or Domain and they chain Ash. Well, you control a Dinomorphia card, which would be the Frenzy or Domain, which means you can activate Intact in response to negate, pay half your life again, negate and destroy the Ash, you know, allowing your Domain or Frenzy to resolve. And then also for the duration of this turn, any battle damage you take is just half of your life at the time you would take it. Which basically means that if you activate Intact, your opponent is not able to kill you by battle that turn, which is absolutely crazy. Now, remember what I was saying, how all the normal traps have a graveyard effect where you can banish them to mitigate effect damage? Well, the counter traps have a similar effect, except you can banish them from the graveyard if your life is 2,000 or less to avoid taking battle damage from that particular battle. which is really, really cool. So that's the graveyard effective intact. You know, you can banish it, and then if you were to take battle damage, you don't take battle damage from that battle. So it's just a way to keep you alive, since again, this deck does tend to flirt with the you know, very low life points, and you don't want your opponent to summon like something bigger and beat over you, and you take the chip damage and lose. So it's nice that they have answers to those particular situations. Then we play the 1 copy of Dinomorphia Sonic. When your opponent activates a spell or trap card while you control a Dinomorphia monster, pay half your life, negate the activation if you do destroy that card, then destroy a Dinomorphia monster you control. This card, in my opinion, isn't not as good as intact, but it still does serve a purpose. It is a spell trap negate. My only issue with the card is that you do have to destroy a Dinomorphia you control, which in some situations might not be ideal, and that's why we just played this card as a one-of. You pretty much search it when you feel like you need it. And then again, same graveyard effect as the intact. It can basically mitigate battle damage that you would take by banishing itself from grave. So that rounds out all of the Dinomorphia traps. Now we're going to move into some more generic trap cards, of which we play a playset of Ferret Flames. This card in this particular deck is pretty broken. It's a normal trap, and it states if the combined attack of all face-up monsters your opponent controls is higher than your life, you make your opponent, keyword there, make your opponent shuffle face-up monsters they control into the deck, their choice, except monsters with 0 attack, so that the combined attack of the remaining monsters they control becomes less than or equal to your life. Well, since this deck has a thing of getting its life points as low as possible, let's just assume you have 1,000 life points, and your opponent controls 3 Blue Eyes White Dragons. If you activate this card, you would effectively force your opponent to shuffle all 3 Blue Eyes White Dragons they control back into their deck, because it would be impossible for them to keep any monsters on field, because no monster that they would keep would be less than or equal to my life, since my life is so low. This card is absolutely cracked in this deck. It is not even once per turn, and because it forces the opponent to remove the monsters, it even gets around monsters that are unaffected by card effects, whether they're activated or not, because it's forcing the player to perform the action. This card is a mandatory staple in this deck, in my opinion, and it is just the best kind of removal, because it doesn't target, and it doesn't even destroy. It just makes your opponent shuffle their whole board back into the deck, effectively, which is nuts. So obviously you max out on a playset of this. Then we also play 2 copies of the Soul of the Supreme King. You pay half your life points, and then you special summon a Supreme King Zark from your extra deck, ignoring its summoning conditions, but negate its effects. So what I like about this is that this trap lets you pay half your life, which again Dinomorphia wants, and then you just get to summon a Supreme King Zark for free. And we'll talk about who he is when we get to the extra deck. But he's just a big 4K beat stick. Yes, his effects are negated, but that doesn't matter. It's a free 4K body. Then, if that wasn't bad enough, you return it to the extra deck during the end phase of the next turn. However, when your opponent activates a spell card or spell effect, you can banish this card from grave and 1 Supreme King Zark from your face-up monster zone to special summon up to 1 each Pendulum Dragon, Xyz Dragon, Synchro Dragon, and Fusion Dragon monsters from your hand, deck, extra deck, and or graveyard. We'll talk about what we summon off of this card's second effect when we get to the extra deck, but just know that it is very, very cool. So obviously this card is a spicy tech choice that we play. Then we play 1 copy of the Super Soaring, a brand new normal trap that came out of the Wild Survivor side set. It just lets you target a dinosaur monster that's banished or in either graveyard and special summon it to your field. So it's a way for you to get back some of your extra deck cards or your main deck ones that are banished potentially, because I know that Dinomorphia, they do have alert, but that only summons from grave. It doesn't have any interaction with monsters in the banish zone. So 1 copy of Super Soaring I felt was nice. In the event that you know one of your monsters does get banished, you can at least bring it back with Super Soaring. Then we play 1 copy of Trap Tracks, not Trap Trick, Trap Tracks. This card kind of does what Trap Trick does, but in my opinion a little bit better for this theme. You target a monster you control, you destroy it, and if you do, you set a normal trap directly from your deck, except Trap Tracks. It can be activated this turn. You can only activate 1 trap card for the rest of this turn after this card resolves. So similar to Trap Trick, it allows you to tutor any trap from your deck to your side of the field. It can be used that turn, and the only cost is that you have to destroy a monster you control, which in Dinomorphia isn't bad, given that all of your monsters float. And because it's not like Trap Trick, you don't have to play duplicates of the card you're trying to set. So like with Super Soaring, we just play one of it. If you wanted to Trap Track into Super Soaring, we can, even though we just play the one copy. Because Trap Track doesn't make you banish another copy of the card of the same name, unlike Trap Trick. So Trap Tracks I felt was a really cool tech choice in this deck. And then to round out the main, again, we play 40 cards. It's just a playset of Solemn Judgment. This deck loves getting its life points as low as possible. And what better way to do that than to constantly activate Judgments to stop your opponent from effectively playing the game. So that rounds out the main board. Again, 40 cards. Now we're going to jump into the extra deck, of which we play triple copies of Dinomorphia Rexstrom. He just got a Prismatic Secret Rare upgrade in the Megatins, and boy, does he look absolutely gorgeous. This card is basically the bread and butter of the whole theme. It's effectively a skill drain on legs. Monsters that your opponent controls that have more attack than your life cannot activate their effects. If that wasn't crazy enough, Rexstrom has a quick effect that states he can pay half your life as cost, and then the attack of all of your opponent's monsters become equal to what my life points are at that time. And if this card is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can target or special summon a level 6 or lower Dinomorphia monster from your graveyard. So this card is a house to deal with. It's effectively a skill drain on legs and very difficult to beat over at a 3k stat line. And the fact that he can modify the stats of your opponent's monsters means that it's also very hard to run over by battle. But if you get rid of it by a card effect, it also floats into something else, and it's very easy to bring another Rexstrom back on board. So, great card. Then we play a playset of Dinomorphia Kentragina. She is a stepping stone to get into Rexstrom a lot of the time. Basically, she allows you to pay half your life points, and she can banish a Dinomorphia trap from the graveyard, and her effect becomes that trap card's effect at activation, which is really strong, so she can copy your trap effects, which is really, really nice. Also, she loses attack equal to your life points. Her base stat is 4,000, so the lower your life is, the bigger Kentragina becomes. And then obviously she also floats upon destruction, which is really, really nice. Then we play 2 copies of Stealth Bergia. This card got an ultra rare upgrade in the Megatins, looking really, really nice as well. Stealth Bergia, you don't really go into that often. It's a little bit more niche. That's why we just play 2 of it in the extra deck. But effectively, while your life points are 2,000 or less, you do not pay life points to activate trap cards or your Dinomorphia monster effects. So that's really cool. And then while this card's on the field, when your opponent activates a monster effect, quick effect, you can inflict damage to your opponent equal to that monster's original attack. So this card can burn your opponent equal to monster's attack of whatever they activate. And then if this card gets destroyed, it also floats upon destruction as well. Then we play the 1 copy of Supreme King Zark. Keep in mind we summon this off of that trap, Soul the Supreme King. So yes, it's negated, but it's still a 4,000 beat stick, which is very, very insane. Then if the opponent activates a spell card, while we control the Zark and have the Soul of the Supreme King engrave, we can banish both the Zark from field and the Soul of the Supreme King to then summon out a Synchro Dragon from our extra deck, which is our copy of Crystal Clearwing Synchro Dragon. You can cheat this card out, and effectively it's a spell trap negate, and it can also, as a quick effect, make itself immune to monster effects and gain the attack of that monster that activated whatever effect you chose to make it immune to, which is absolutely insane. So this is a nice 2-card, package in the extra deck, and all we got to do is play that Soul of the Supreme King trap in the main deck, which also halves our life points in the process, which feeds into what Dinomorphia wants. Also, something else to bring up is that if the Zark is destroyed before it gets shuffled back by the resolution of the trap, this card does put itself in the Pendulum Zone as a pen scale, and you are able to use this Pendulum effect, which is Fusion, Synchro, and Xyz monsters your opponent controls cannot activate their effects. And then once per turn, when your opponent adds a card from their deck to their hand, except during the draw phase or damage step, you can destroy that card if they searched. So Zark has some really cool synergy with this deck list. But now, moving on to the remaining extra deck cards, you play 1 Evilzor Lars. This is brand new out of Duelist Nexus. It's a beautiful rank 6 Xyz that we can make using 2 copies of Kentragina, and it's effectively a Omni Negate, which is really, really crazy. It's not once per turn, and also your opponent cannot target this card with monster effects, which makes it very difficult to remove. Then we play, of course, the 1 Lagia, followed by the 1 copy of Dolka. Again, it's very easy to make these cards in this deck, and you have more negation and also negation of summons. Then we play the 1 Grenosaurus Giga Cannon, brand new out of Duelist Nexus as well. A great rank 4 for dinosaur decks. This card is absolutely insane. It can gain a lot of attack by attaching a material, and also burn your opponent as well. And then if it's destroyed by battle or card effect, it can also burn your opponent for even more damage and also pop a card on field in the process. So very great generic rank 4 for dinosaurs. And then we round it out with just one copy of Tornado Dragon. Sometimes, you know, we just got to have a quick out to some back row, and Tornado Dragon is perfect for that. So that rounds out the extra deck. Now we're going to dive into the side deck before we wrap things up here, of which we are playing a playset of Raw Sphere Mode. I don't think anybody is respecting this card right now, and this card is absolutely perfect for decks that are just like, you know, they want to build a whole board. I'm thinking decks like Infernoble. They usually end on like 2 copies of their Link 1 Charlemagne, and they'll probably have like another monster on the board as well that you just don't even care. Just eat it up with the Sphere Mode. This is also for decks like Kashtira now, post Banlist. I don't really know what they're going to be doing if they're not ending on a Rise Heart. They're probably going to be like Shangri Era, Fenrir, and maybe Unicorn Pass. Which again, just auto loses to a Sphere Mode. I'm thinking of decks like Vanadium as well. They usually end on a bunch of negates, Baron, Appaloosa, Crystal Wing. Again, you can just eat that up with Sphere Mode. So Sphere Mode, I think, is still very powerful as a side card, and I don't think that there's a lot of people expecting it right now. So I think it definitely is going to put in work if you side into it. We sideboard the 1 Dino Wrestler Pancratops, again for when we know we're going to go second. You get a free extender and a nice board breaking card on top of that. We also side 2 copies of Forbidden Droplet. Now that a Rise Heart's banned, this card actually gets a lot better, because while a Rise Heart existed in the format, it was a Macrocosmos on legs, so you actually couldn't pay the cost for Droplet, which means Droplet wasn't that prevalent. But now that a Rise Heart's gone, expect to see a lot of people playing Droplet either in their main board or the sideboard. Then we played 2 copies of Cosmic Cyclone, the 1 Duster, again for our back row matchups. We just don't want to deal with stuff. Cosmic Cyclone's also really good against Unchained, just being able to banish their traps and prevent them from destroying them. Then we also play Playset of Evenly Matched, just for when you know you're going second. Great board breaking option. And then to round out the rest of the side is just a playset of Anti-Spell Fragrance, which unfortunately was not touched on the ban list. This card, in my opinion, is very unfair to play with, or play against. Especially for a deck like Dinomorphia. Like, after game 1, once your opponent knows what you're on, they're probably going to be siding into, like, you know, their Lightning Storms, their Dusters, and whatnot, and you can just end their whole career by flipping an Anti-Spell Fragrance and then sitting behind Rexstrom and watching them struggle. It's unfortunate, but obviously it's still legal. Konami didn't ban it, so we're going to take advantage and play it until it gets banned. So that's going to round out the deck profile for my updated Dinomorphia deck list for the post September 25th ban list and post 25th anniversary Megatins. If you guys liked the profile, let me know down below what your thoughts were. Like the video, subscribe so you don't miss on any more of my future uploads, and let's keep this community growing. Like I said, we're working our way to 1,500 subs, and I can't do it without your help. With that being said, this is Nick, hitting that end phase. Peace.